Good morning. So my name is Scott Bull, CEO of Pace Industries. We operate operations in 9 states in the U.S., and the issues that we're talking about today are universal throughout the U.S. Today, Pace is facing some of the most significant challenges of the last 35 years. Our commitment to excellence requires that our equipment is capable and that our associates are capable. The skills needed to repair, program, and operate our equipment has changed, and the available trained workforce is few. The lack of specific, targeted training for legacy associates and young people entering the workforce has put this commitment at risk. We support the recent initiatives that are developing technical centers throughout the state and the country, but our progress is slow. I was in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania the other day, toured a facility that would rival any facility that General Electric Corporation could build for itself. Pace is encouraged by its recent working relationship with North Arkansas Community College in Harrison to develop curriculum and training courses which are designed to increase the availability of qualified, skilled workers in that area. Arkansas must move fast to compete and offer people in this state and the industries in this state training to close this skills gap. Otherwise, we will lose manufacturing jobs to other states, and our workers will lose the opportunity to make significant contributions to their companies, earn higher wages, and raise their standard of living. Because of this, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. She has a message we need to hear. She is one of the people who really get it. Jennifer McNelly was named president of the Manufacturing Institute, the nonprofit affiliate of the National Association of Manufacturers, effective April 1, 2012. As president of the Institute, Jennifer will drive an agenda focused on improving and expanding manufacturing in the United States through education, innovation, and research. Jennifer has extensive experience in workforce development, employer engagement, and business. She is a proven leader at the Institute as the chief architect of one of the organization's flagship initiatives, one of my favorite, the National Association of Manufacturers endorsed Manufacturing Skills Certification System, a set of nationally portable, industry-recognized manufacturing skills certifications. The system is building the next generation of skilled manufacturing employees by influencing secondary and post-secondary education reform efforts in over 35 states, which is building the next generation of skilled manufacturing talent. Prior to joining the Institute, Jennifer, a member of the Senior Executive Service, was administrator for the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Regional Innovation and Transformation. In this capacity, she managed the President's High-Growth Job Training Initiative and the community-based job training grants. Her strong private sector experience includes serving as the Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, LLC, an international consulting firm specializing in helping Fortune 500 companies build strategic partnerships with government agencies in support of workforce development. Jennifer is chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on the Future of Manufacturing, a member of the National Standards Institute Personnel Certification Accreditation Committee, the Precision Metal Forming Association Education Foundation, she's a busy lady, and the SME Education Foundation Board.
Good morning. How's everyone this morning? Randy, where are you? Thank you for having me. And Scott, thank you for that very generous introduction. That long litany of what I know means I get to travel around a lot and look at what's going on across the country and, frankly, across the world in where we compete. But in the end, the governor actually had it spot on, and it's such a pleasure to follow him, which is, in the end, the hard work starts here at home. And so as this conference was being put together, and I had the opportunity to talk to Randy about sort of goals for this morning's session, I hope to really set the stage for you, because I truly believe that it is the power of one. And in fact, it frankly is the single-minded individuals that are committed to change that truly drive change in this country. So I hope to give you a couple good ideas, and in fact, I know at the end we're going to do some Q&A, so as I'm going through the session. That being said, there is, I think, some framework and lessons learned, and some really great examples, both here in Arkansas, but then across the country as to what's going on. So I hope to inform you a little bit about what's going on across the country, give you one or two ideas, but most important, by the time I'm over, think about the one thing you'll do when you leave this room today. Because whether you are an educator, an employer, a policy leader, or part of economic and workforce development, you are still one. And it truly takes that community to drive change. And as the video said, you know, manufacturing has some challenges underway. And in the context of that, in fact, what was interesting, when Scott mentioned my time at the U.S. Department of Labor, I talked to people about this last night, that I had the opportunity during my tenure to meet with 4,000 industry executives in every single economy, every sector of our nation's economy. And in the end, it was, kids aren't interested in our careers. They're not showing up with the right skills. And in the end, we don't know what to do about it. There is a renewed sense that this is not their problem or my problem. This is our problem. And it actually starts with the image of manufacturing. And when we think about manufacturing today, and in fact, I've talked to some kids, tell me what you know about manufacturing. I have a great video up on our website that talks about this. They learned about it in the Industrial Revolution. So to the high school instructors here today, time to update that content. An important time, but when kids today think of manufacturing, they think of the 3 Ds: dark, dirty, and dangerous. And I can tell you, if you have been in a manufacturing facility today, it is as far away from that image as you can possibly imagine. And I often talk about the 3 Ps. It's about the products we produce. It's the process by which we do it. And in the end, it's about the people. Because it is truly our frontline workforce that is the source of innovation in this country. So what do we do about it? Well, in the end, it's that public perception that impacts manufacturing. Because 3 out of 10 parents today would encourage their kids into careers in manufacturing. 3 out of 10. We've lost them before they even knew it was an opportunity. How do we reposition what is the world of work today? Because I think of young people today, and I think of their gaming inclinations, and I think of Scott's facility. And I think of the computer numeric controls that run his facility. Man, that is gaming full time. That's the job I want. We also know that in our skills gap, 80% plus of our nation's manufacturers can't find quality workers. That's why it comes down to, as the governor said, the community level. There is no silver bullet, but boy, we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And there are a lot of lessons to be learned. And your responsibility as a leader is to take those lessons and to apply them to our community. And in the end, what we do know is the cost is very real for our nation's employers. In our skills gap report with Accenture that looked at training, it was measured in real business terms: cycle time, downtime, and overtime. Lost revenue to manufacturers today because they can't find the workers they need. But this isn't just about education and where people come from and what parents expose them to. We have met the enemy, and it is us. I'm going to start at the top of this because the majority of our manufacturers, first and foremost, hire by word of mouth. And I'm not mocking that. That actually has been a very successful legacy approach. And in fact, if you looked at HR systems in manufacturing today, they probably still are like their grandfather's manufacturing. And it was hire a friend, somebody that's a referral. And right below that, in fact, is pay a premium. Staffing agencies are my infamous post and pray. Let's throw it out to the masses and pray for the best. And what causes me the greatest concern on this slide is, in fact, what shows up at the bottom, which is with our nation's employers, they are not first and foremost thinking about the education partners in their own backyard and the connection that they can have together. We actually see a bit of improvement in this number in our next skills gap that'll be out at the end of the month. But in the end, our nation's public education system, the public trust of the future of this nation, isn't the first place we're looking. And part of it is, if you had a room full of employers, in fact, many of them are probably thinking this, if they just showed up on time, I'd take it from there. In fact, the governor talked about that this morning. He talked about the personal skills, personal effectiveness skills, the soft skills. And often employers talk about the soft skills. And what we know is technical skills may get them the job, but frankly, the soft skills keep the job. It's about teamwork. It's about showing up on time. And then the other one I often hear from our nation's manufacturers is "and drug-free." So in a high-tech, high-pay, high-growth sector in this country, we have reduced our expectation of new employees to drug-free in attendance. Yet manufacturing has the greatest multiplier of any sector. So how do we start to change that perspective? Because I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't show up today because it was the blame game. I showed up because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to know that I could pull activities from across the country and leave them behind, and that wherever you sat, you had the ability to impact change. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but it takes the power of one. And what we know from our efforts across the country is the framework is really 3 buckets, and you can't just focus on one. We need to change the perception of the world of work. Parents, students, teachers, counselors, frankly, ourselves. Ask yourself the question, if you are in manufacturing today, have you encouraged your son or daughter into a manufacturing career? It starts with us. What is our expectation? Because culturally, we're a society that's been driven by a 4-year degree. And that's what measured success. Yet yesterday we were talking about a young woman here in Arkansas who actually had a 4-year degree, couldn't find a job, and now she's a welder. And she has a great career. So it starts with us. And then it starts with redefining what quality partnership looks like at the community level. What does engaging with education look like? If 80% of our manufacturers don't even know how to start that conversation, how do we help them? And then, most important, it ends with policy. Because though we can have grant-funded activities and pilot projects, if we do not have public policy incentivizing the right outcomes for economic development and growth, it doesn't matter what we do. Because in the end, if the school counselor or the principal is measured that the success of his or her school is based on the number of individuals that go on to a 4-year degree, or higher education is funded by the students that enroll in 4-year institutions. So we need to rethink what that looks like. I'm going to share some examples of that. So I'm going to start with the perception issue. In the end, how we make manufacturing exciting and real to young people. And what I do know is it really starts with exposure. And if, in fact, you can inspire a child, it makes all the difference in the world. But we also then talk about the pipeline and the K-12 system, and we leave big pockets of our workforce on the table. So as you are thinking about the strategies that you need to put in place in your community, it's not just about the youth. We need to fix that pipeline for the long run. It's equally about our transitioning veterans. I would argue among our best, most qualified workforce, yet they don't know how to connect. And then it's about the diversity of our workforce. I actually have an executive from Ohio coming who's in the Appalachian region in Ohio, and she's struggling with getting a more diverse workforce. Because in the end, and I'll use me as a woman in manufacturing, we're about 22% of the workforce. And unless I see myself and where I can go and have role models to look at, doesn't matter. So how do we build diversity into our expectations? And I'm going to start with your first opportunity. National Manufacturing Day. Randy mentioned this earlier, October 3rd. Where will you be on October 3rd? We have 10 events going around. And actually, Scott, I learned that Pace Industries was so successful at Manufacturing Day that they added a second day. That's fabulous. 500 plus kids coming through. It's going to change the perception of those young people because I've seen it happen personally. And to our education institutions that have training, open up the doors and invite people in. To the business leaders, think about an op-ed. If, in fact, we do not change the perception of manufacturing, nobody's going to change that for us. So the 12 million plus and the 6 million more in our allied sectors, in our support sectors in manufacturing, we are the Army. And even if you don't have time today as a manufacturer to invite somebody in, buy your staff ice cream. Remind them how important they are. Remind them that it is their responsibility as parents, as community leaders, to talk about what they do. Who doesn't like to do that? Manufacturing. Talk about it at church. Talk about it in the grocery store. Heaven forbid anybody's next to me in line at the grocery store. They're going to learn what I do before I'm done. Because I am so proud to be part of this manufacturing economy. We are responsible for that image. But we can't actually do that alone. And though Manufacturing Day is one day a year, there's great tools out there. Actually, we have for the second year the Discovery Channel. I was watching How It's Made. Anybody watch How It's Made? Big fan of that show. But I see a couple head nods. What I always love about How It's Made on the Discovery Science Channel is they always show a high-tech, automated process, a middle skills intervention, and then the art side of manufacturing. By the time I'm done, man, I've made trailers, I've made cars, I've made paper-mache giraffes. I think that was the last one. But I was watching it this weekend, and I actually happened to pop up. They're doing a marathon on October 3rd to celebrate Manufacturing Day as our national media partner. But in the end, opening up the doors and sharing with the community the job opportunities, the future, the commitment you have, it really starts at home. But that's only part of the equation. So in the end, in communities across the country, we have our national Dream It, Do It effort. And if Manufacturing Day is one day a year, where we open up our doors and invite everybody in, Dream It, Do It is what happens in between. And actually, here in Arkansas, Randy talked a little bit about their academies that they did this summer. But in the end, it's really about communicating with parents, students, teachers, and counselors about good career pathways, about getting kids engaged. And in the end, here's a couple photos from the academies this summer. What I love about these pictures is the students are engaged. They're understanding why math is important because they're using it. So internships, exposure, all important. And in the end, communicating to parents that success can be a technical education experience, an internship and an apprenticeship, and a good paying job. And I think about this group of young women, and I wonder which one's going to be my boss next, because they clearly learned something that day. Something they hadn't thought about before. So in communities across the country, now 32 states, Dream It, Do It is the means by which manufacturers are creating ambassador programs and assigning somebody under the age of 30 to go back and talk to the young person, to help them understand what the opportunity can be, because it takes more than just a single day. And across the network, they reached 250,000 students last year. 50,000 parents, we talk about those key influencers, 11,000 educators. Actually, that should be 32. We just brought on West Virginia. But in the end, messaging does matter. And part of the Dream It, Do It brand is how you use it here in Arkansas, but to get that manufacturing matters. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then the diversity. So I'll speak to one of my greatest prides, which is our Step Ahead initiative. So every year we recognize women leaders in manufacturing. So our spin on STEM is STEP. Women in science, technology, engineering, and production. Because it's well documented that in the end, if women can't see themselves in the career, don't see the opportunity, they're not going to advance. So under the Step Ahead initiative, we recognize women leaders today, from the production line to the C-suite. Nominations are actually open to the manufacturers today. As you think about the women leaders, they actually will launch emerging leaders this year. But in the end, it's about celebrating those that are contributing to our economy today. And then it's about our veterans. How do we create a seamless pathway to bring them back home? They don't know how to translate those skills. Yet I think about what manufacturers say about the skills that they need, and critical thinking, ability to operate in a team, grace under pressure. Hands down, our nation's military have those skills. They may not be a machinist, but they had to machine a part to keep the helicopter flying. How do we create those pathways? And our Get Skills to Work efforts have done that across the country in partnerships with companies like GE, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and others. Helping to translate those technical skills, because we know they have the personal effectiveness skills. And reaching down into the community to tell the story of veterans that came home and now serve on our nation's economic front line. Trained over 5,000 veterans, 10,000 have been hired in our efforts. So what can you do? It's where we get to assignment time. Because I truly believe you want to walk out of this room today thinking about what you can do. And this is just the image. On the image front, what can you do? Tell your story. Tell it loud and proud. Empower your employees to tell your story. To educators, if you haven't been in a manufacturing facility recently, boy, make that a priority. Bring your counselors, bring your school board. In this debate of Common Core high-stakes testing, let them see the complexity of the systems going on. And to our community leaders, certainly our economic development leaders, look to engage. Help be the one that pulls these partnerships together to drive change. Because none of us can do it alone. There isn't enough time, effort, or money. So that just takes care of one, and that gets back to how do we change from my grandfather's manufacturing to modern-day manufacturing, automation and robotics. The next is the quality pipeline. How do we build meaningful public-private partnerships to drive change? It's interesting, we did a research study with the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it was to look at scaling of industry credentials. Scott mentioned that's one of our big flagship initiatives at the Manufacturing Institute, because we think the better we are at creating transparency, the easier it will be for both sides to connect. What we found in the course of that is what I'd call market signals. How do manufacturers effectively communicate above drug-free and attendance, let's take that part for granted, what they actually need in an entry-level workforce? And what I can tell you from years of work across all of our nation's sectors and a good 10 years in manufacturing is at the core, we're 80% the same. And we spend 100% of our time arguing over the 20% difference. Whereas if, in fact, we could focus on that 80% core to build and strengthen, then CAT would know what their responsibility was. And PACE would know, somebody coming out, what their responsibility was. And that's actually where industry credentials come into play. And it's grounded in competencies. Now, we have a culture in the education system here in this country that it is about a celebration of a journey that ends. And I know that because I went all the way back to Alaska to my niece's last high school graduation in the family, and we celebrated. Yet we haven't quite instilled culturally that it is about lifelong learning, because I can tell you certainly in any industry today, the one constant is change. And in the end, we need to have solid basic academic skills, personal effectiveness skills, and foundational technical skills. But we will be lifelong learners. And again, if you looked at this pyramid, and I know it's a bit of an eyesore here, but the bottom 3 tiers are the same across all industries. And today I'd argue that's sort of what high school was about. But now, how much time do we spend in remediation in higher education because we didn't end up with the basics? Let's change those rules. Let's reinvent education to be about knowledge acquisition, not just a point in time. And I realize these are very uncomfortable conversations in institutions that have been around for a very long time. But part of that is driving change. And from our perspective, that starts with transparency, and certainly on behalf of our nation's manufacturers, it starts with certification. So I'm going to set the stage with another quick video here, and then I'm going to get into what does that mean. Because I think part of the assignment here in Arkansas, as I talk about what's going on around you, is where this fits into your plan. And you can be first in the nation, last in the nation, but you're competing on the world stage now. Okay, we did test this, so.
The search for skilled workers has led to frustration. No one stands out. Even an academic degree doesn't mean the person is ready. And in the meantime, workers in our communities are trying to get our attention. This frustration is affecting our bottom line, but it doesn't have to. The Manufacturing Institute has launched the Manufacturing Skills Certification System, or SCS. Created by manufacturers for manufacturers, this system is one we can trust. It validates both the education and experience needed to be productive and successful on the job, and helps us find the best applicants for any position. As a result, resumes make more sense, The applicants you hire save you time and money with less training and turnover. And your community? They'll thank you for making the job search easier. You can solve your own workforce problems. Check out the SCS Toolkit today for all the resources you need to turn your frustration into a great find.
So I'm going to leave those logos up there for just a second. And being from Washington, it's not often that we decide somebody else has a better idea than we did. Usually we're good about reinventing that idea. But about 8 years ago, we had been well known, and in fact, if you search skills gap in manufacturing, chances are every hit on the first 10 pages you'll see on Google will be something that the Institute has published. So for decades, Scott mentioned this a little bit about our background, we were really good at researching it. And we continued to say that we had a problem. And then one day we decided to do something about it. And we knew it wasn't a perfect solution, but we knew if we could start to act and to drive change, we could make a difference in the skills gap. So we actually looked at the behaviors of manufacturers. And what we found interesting in that analysis was, in the end, you go into any manufacturing facility today, and it is driven by process and transparencies in standards. And in fact, we proudly claim an ISO standard in our production process. It means we know what we're doing and we're constantly looking at it and we're process improving it. And we do that in every single area but human capital development. We manage every part of our supply chain but the human side. But what we also knew was manufacturers had in fact created standards. In fact, several of these up there, including the American Welding Society, many of you likely use in your hiring process today. So what we knew was there were actually tools in the marketplace developed by manufacturers for manufacturers. We did it for ourselves. We had a problem. We needed to fix it. We said if we create a set of standards and then assess to them, it can help solve our problem. Now, if you think about that, you think about sort of the need to change the image of the industry. I bet you wouldn't go to a doctor today that didn't have a piece of paper hanging on the wall that said what board he passed. And frankly, I don't know about anyone else. I did a lot of work in the automotive service side in youth development, and recently bought a new car and then went to the dealer and said, okay, I'd like to look at the service area. So he took me back and he showed me the nice internet access and the beautiful chairs and the ice cream. I said, no, I'd love to look at the bays. Because I didn't really care whether I could have ice cream while I waited. What I cared was whether or not the individuals that were in the back had a commitment to youth development and were ASE certified. Yet we in manufacturing have an expectation of drug-free in attendance. And unless we change that expectation by using the standards that we ourselves developed in partnership with education, not to 100% solution, but to that 80% core, can we in communities across the country make a difference? And the answer is yes. Because what I do know is in the complexity of manufacturing today, you do need basic academics. Reading, writing, applied math, locating information. What does that sound like? Reading instructions, following a blueprint? And there's a tool that measures that today. It's called ACT's National Career Readiness Credential. In fact, if you have kids in high school today, chances are they've taken either the ACT or the SAT. They're starting to look at colleges. And decades of information on jobs in this country codify the basic skills. And in fact, in South Carolina, every high school student is graduating not just with a high school diploma, but with a national career readiness credential. Because it says to employers, not here's what I think they know, here's what they know. And we have the same thing in production. We have it in machining, we have it in welding. So if your expectation today is drug-free in attendance, and if tomorrow to the HR executives you went and did a Google and looked at this information and said, oh my, not only do they validate the basic academic skills, but health and safety, quality production, manufacturing processes, kind of hit the trifecta. Doesn't mean they know your way. Doesn't mean they're going to be a seasoned industrial maintenance technician. That's where partnership comes in. So in communities across this country, industry and education together are embedding these standards. To say to a student, if you are in a welding program, and in fact, this is a weld from a student that graduated from a technical school, not in Arkansas, let's be clear. Glenn wasn't from your school. But walked into a manufacturer, was given a blueprint, sent to a weld booth, and that's what came out. And I can tell you this student is not certified by the American Welding Society. And did that institution do an injustice to that student? Absolutely. Because in the end, it removes the question of whether or not that's a quality weld. Because it puts it in the hands of a standard that is transparent. Now, is that the right process for that particular manufacturer? Well, in this case, yes, it was. But if somebody walked in your door, the manufacturing certification, would it give you some level of insurance and assurance that your investment in training can train them your way? Because culturally, that's what we do in manufacturing. And in fact, nothing makes me more crazy than the headlines that I read that say, A, we don't have a problem. Have you been into a facility? I haven't been into one that has told me they don't have a challenge. And B, if we just paid a nickel more, the problem would go away. What we need is purposeful engagement that build the pipeline. And I'll go back to South Carolina as an example. I saw a video by our Dream It Do It partners in South Carolina that was an apprenticeship signing of students. There they sat at tables like an NFL draft, complete with company logos, and signed their engagement strategies. In communities across the country, manufacturers are stepping up and offering rotational internships. Because if, in fact, a hiring manager, and this happens to be focused in the machining area, understands blueprint reading, drill press, can look at a set of standards, they're going to know what that individual can do. And what the governor actually talked about is every community is unique, but a standard is a standard. Whether you're a transitioning veteran, a woman, a high school student, whether you graduated from high school this year or 10 years ago, the credential is the great equalizer. So that individuals that may not succeed can go back and get the training they need to then enter into the workforce prepared. And in the end, it's about that public-private partnership. It is a shared responsibility to build that pathway. Because I could argue we spend a lot of time cycling individuals in at the bottom of this stack. They are the masses that we bring in, and some succeed, and then they advance. We talked about this last night. There are a lot of things we are not as effective as we could be as manufacturers, and one of them is telling someone what the career opportunity could be, and how you get there, and how that all fits into the community as a whole, and how you build a larger pool of workers so it's not just cycling for a nickel more. And giving young people and transitioning veterans work-based learning opportunities, among the most effective outcomes to employers, and I know because you use staffing agencies to do it, is how did they fit for us? Yet we could be giving those experiences to students that are in education pathways today. And then there is a point at which what we think is really important for the student is it always links back to credit. Because what I do know about our nation's education system, and certainly our community colleges have been very effective at this, is customized job training. I can train Kat's way, I can train John Deere's way, I can train Pace's way. And that's good, but if it doesn't advance the student in an academic pathway, when you know it's lifelong learning, credentials help build that bridge. And in the end, getting college credit, I think about my niece Haley. So I often talk about, I don't have my own kids, but I've got a lot of nieces and nephews, and I have two lost boys. Affectionately refer to them as the lost boys. One went to college on a football scholarship, was on the front page of the Juneau Empire all the way through high school, was the superstar, and wasn't ready. Washed out within the first semester of college. Couldn't handle the academics. Juneau, Alaska to Minnesota was a really big cultural difference. And in the end, went off the map for 4 weeks because he thought he'd failed. Because he didn't know there was an option other than going to college. Now he's working on his post-secondary degree, engaged in a career that he loves that's working with kids. Someday he may actually be a teacher, but now it's in the context of what drives him. My niece Haley, who now just graduated from high school, considered the military, come from a good middle-class family. If we were going to college, we were paying for it ourselves. And Haley knew she didn't have the means by which to do that. Has an unbelievable work ethic, was working full-time at Taco Bell her senior year, and as soon as she graduated, put in an application to Whirlpool. And I think about the possibilities of Haley if she persists and loves her job. She could run that company someday. Because that's what we do in manufacturing. We grow our workforce. We build our workforce. Yet it's not very often that we talk about our tuition reimbursement and how that can help somebody advance in their career. So we need to be clear about that with our employer partners. We also need to offer those internships. And what we do know is it makes a difference. So to the governor's point that every circumstance is unique, you're absolutely right. We have 14 credentialing partners. And for you, the right solution may be there, or it may just be ACT's National Career Readiness Credential, because what you're really hiring for today is a high school diploma. But to employers that use credentials and to education institutions that use credentials, it's adding value. Back to that cycle time, downtime, and overtime, start to measure those partnerships. Evaluate their effectiveness. And across the country, since we decided there was little harm in acting, and we pulled those partners together and said, how do we drive change at the community level across this country? In 3 years' worth of reporting, 290,000 assessments have been issued in the marketplace. And states are changing policy to make sure that alignment happens. Because what I heard time and time again from my education partners is, but industry doesn't value it. They're not asking for an AWS certification, or they're not asking for the NCRC, or they're not asking for the certified production technician. They're not asking. So if they're not asking, it's not the right priority. My argument back is, and they never even knew it was an option. Because the majority of the employers in this room today, if I would have asked you to raise your hand as to whether or not you knew of any of these certifications, I'd be surprised if it were 10% or less. And those 10% have been early adopters. But in the end, it's how we educate the employers as to what they are. And that comes back to being a shared responsibility. So part of what we've done to recognize our education leaders across this country is to create an M list. To community and technical colleges that are not just training to an industry standard, but delivering that certification, we're making that very public to our nation's manufacturers and saying, if you're looking for quality talent, here are the questions you should be asking. And what we've seen in states across the country, and I'll use Indiana as an example, because again, I know there's automotive production here in Arkansas. And in states like Indiana, we've seen credentialing go from 5th to 3rd in the nation. And the states Indiana passed were Ohio and Pennsylvania. And if I were thinking about a strategy to attract manufacturing, and if I were an economic development leader, thinking about how I talk about the great assets, the infrastructure, and the people, I'd be talking about the certified workers. Because that's clear to an employer. So what can you do today? Learn about them. Take the personal assignment as you walk out the door today to understand, to know what you're doing today, and to not accept the status quo as good enough. Because that is another thing that is inherent in manufacturing. Is our job is to question every single day how we improve the process, to never assume that we know all the answers, and to explore a new set of tools that you may not have known about before today. And there may be one right for you, there may be two right for you, or it may be the apprenticeship or internships that is right for you. But in the end, we have to engage. And then it gets down to policy. And what we do know is that we're very good at being vocal on tax policy, and we're very good at energy policy. We don't always necessarily know how to talk about education policy and what that means. We know we got a problem, but we don't know what we're going to do about it. But in the end, if the executives in industry in Arkansas, and again, I know this problem exists in retail and in healthcare and in manufacturing together, storm the good senator's office to say we need a new, renewed sense of public-private partnership, policy will change. Because we've seen it in states like Indiana, where they're moving towards alignment and incentivizing action in support of all of those activities. Looking at image, looking at the quality, looking at public-private partnerships, looking at how you bring those activities together. Give another example in Kansas, led by the governor of Kansas. In Kansas now, students that graduate from high school with an industry-based certification in one of their demand occupations are getting a free ride to post-secondary education. They are building their workforce one student at a time. And though it may seem like this is about more money or new money, we think this is about how we use the existing resources, relationships, and partnerships that we have more effectively. And North Carolina, another state down here in this region. In North Carolina, they've looked at how they're paying and funding technical education, because trust me, a computer class is not the same price point as a machining class. Can't deliver the same capacity. So what they've done in looking at how they fund education is to balance that difference, to make sure that there are proportionate resources from sources like Perkins to help support technical education. But what I also know is we can build really great classrooms, but if we don't fix the image and share the opportunity that is employment, it doesn't matter what we do. So to employers, make your voice heard. To the educators in this room, I was just talking at my table with a principal that's putting a career academy in place. If you run into a barrier because of how success is being measured, You need to let people know. Can't fix it if they don't know the incentives don't align. And to our economic development leaders and workforce leaders, we ask the same. Because in the end, it really does take a full community. And what we've learned is, first and foremost, it must be the voice of industry that drives change. Because it is the jobs in the community. The governor's absolutely right. We value every single job. And somehow, as a country, we've lost sight of the dignity of the world of work and what it means to be successful. But if, in fact, we can come around a common vision, we can drive change. Because the other thing I do know is Little Rock is not just competing with Indiana or North Carolina. Indiana is competing with the world, and Little Rock is competing with the world. And in the end, the quality of life in this country is linked to a quality job. And that's a manufacturing job. Jim Clifton has a great quote: countries that will lead in the global economy do so because of a quality job. And that's what we provide in manufacturing. That's the impact. It is, in fact, manufacturing that makes America strong. So hopefully today, you've got at least one assignment, one action, one inspiration. Because my question is then, I know I'm getting on a plane tonight, what will you do? Happy to take questions. Or hear an inspiration. And while you're thinking, I'll share one personal story. So, about 4 years ago, I set myself on a journey. Some of you may have been on a similar journey, where I decided I was going to lose weight. And I lost 75 pounds. So if you were to hold up a picture of me 5 years ago and a picture of me today, you would say, who was that person? And what I learned, and what I want you to take away from today, is if I'd have thought at the front end how hard it was, I probably would have never done it. But if in the end I knew that every step I took, including the half marathons I now run, that every single journey began with a leader, and that's you, and began one step at a time. We have a lot of resources to bring to support your effort, but in the end, the accountability truly does sit with you, in the partnerships, in the questions you ask, and in the role that you play. Because that's what makes America great. Thank you.